Hi there, this is Solid Shonen from Solid Shonen Films, and welcome to the letter D in the alphabet of my favourite films. Again, this is just going to be a bunch of films that I really like. Again, please let me know in the comments your favourite films beginning with the letter D. I really look forward to reading your comments and enjoy your comments. Again, I haven't seen every single film beginning with the letter D, so through the passage of time this list will change probably, and again, when I do this mystical, magical top 150 at some point, there will be other entries in the letter D, I am certain of, as I watch more and more films. So let's make a start. I think there's about 21 of them. The first one is Jodorowsky's The Dance of Reality. This is from 2013. And this is, if I say it has everything that makes Jodorowsky amazing and frustrating and mystical and pretentious and wonderful, then you might have an idea. This is a story about his childhood in Chile, growing up with his father, who was a proud Stalinist and wanted to assassinate the head of the Chilean state. It features lots of Jodorowsky's children as Jodorowsky's father and as Jodorowsky himself. Jodorowsky makes an appearance. You still have the clowns, you have amputees, you have scenes that are funny, you have scenes that are moving, you have scenes that are completely barking. But at the end of the day, somehow, through his special kind of alchemy, the film is actually very moving at the end. And it's one of his greatest films. Jodorowsky's just like, there's something very mystical and magical about Jodorowsky, and The Dance of Reality is fantastic. The next one is a film you can't get in DVD, or maybe you can, but it's really, really expensive. It will be appearing in my Saijit Ray season at some point. It's Days and Nights in the Forest from 1955. This is a really simple story, like a lot of Saijit Ray films are, about a bunch of friends that go into the country for a weekend of relaxation and fun, and just their adventures with women and finding out about themselves and their friendship. Again, doesn't sound that great, but again, it's just beautifully told with characters you care about, characters you want to spend more time with, and it's just one of Saijit Ray's many great films and one of my favourite Saijit Ray films. So that's Days and Nights in the Forest, which I hope one day more Saijit Ray films are available. So the next bunch of films have got either Dead or Death at the start. I'm sure it's just a coincidence, it's just the alphabet, don't blame me. The first one is Dead Man, Jim Jarmusch's western starring Johnny Depp as William Blake. No, not that William Blake, even though Gary Farmer plays an Indian called Nobody who thinks he's that William Blake. It's shot in black and white. It's absolutely gorgeous. If you're familiar with Jarmusch, you know his style, his pacing. If you're not familiar with Jarmusch, it could be a little bit off-putting. And it has just such a great cast. It's a beautiful road movie, essentially. It's through the West. Crispin Glover's in it. Gabriel Byrne, Alfred Molina, John Hurt, Robert Mitchum in his last role, Lance Henriksen, Michael Wincott, Billy Bob Thornton, Iggy Pop. Who else have I forgotten? I've probably forgotten people. Johnny Depp gives a fairly dazed performance as a stranger in a strange land, taken under the wing of this very odd Native American. But it's just such a beautiful film. It does have bursts of fairly extreme violence, but don't let that put you off. It's just, again, with all Jarmusch films, if you just go with it and just go with the rhythm, it's just a beautiful ride, and one of Jarmusch's best films. So next on the list is Dead of Night. This is the kind of portmanteau film to end all portmanteau films. An architect turns up at a country house and proceeds to tell the guests that he's got a terrible sense of deja vu, and he's been here before, and they share stories of odd little things that have happened to them. And of course the big famous one is about a ventriloquist dummy, which will still give you the willies 70 odd years later. It's just absolutely fantastic. Yes, there's a kind of golfing ghost story stuck in for a bit of light relief, but the rest of the stories are really enjoyable, and the structure of the film is just an eternal loop, an eternal nightmare, and it's just fantastic. Made in 1945, it still stands up today, and it's quite fantastic. The next one is Dead or Alive. This is the Arrow edition of the Dead or Alive trilogy, which Dead or Alive 2, Birds, and Dead or Alive Final. This is Takashi Miike at his most barking, and that's saying something. It was a basic script of triads and Yakuza in a turf war, and Takashi Miike took it and turned it on its head. The opening 12 minutes is just some of the most incredible opening 12 minutes in cinema history. At breakneck speed, he just gets rid of all exposition, and once it settles down, it's just a great story of a cop trying to chase a gang. It has one of the greatest endings in cinema history. It has something to offend everybody. It has every bodily fluid known to humankind involved. It's one of those films that you kind of just have to see, and then you'll say to yourself, did I actually see that? And that's when Miike is at his best. Yes, his films don't always work, but he usually shows you something that you haven't seen before, which is rare in these days of remakes and sequels and rehashed images and ideas. And Dead or Alive is just insane. I think this was the second Takashi Miike film I saw after Audition. and you wouldn't actually think it's the same director, because obviously the first hour and a bit of audition is fairly, typical Japanese stately compositions, not a lot of camera movement, before audition kind of takes a left turn into completely different territory. Whereas Dead or Alive, he just goes full throttle from the opening scenes. Yeah, Dead or Alive. The second Dead or Alive is worth seeing. The third one ain't that great. So the next one, more dead, and it's Dead Ringers. Probably Cronenberg's best. This is the perfect amalgamation of Cronenberg's ideas and actually having the capability of acting and budget to actually realise that vision. Whereas his earlier films, yes, there was interesting ideas in them, but because of budget restrictions or because of acting limitations, you always got the feeling that his full vision wasn't quite on the screen. Whereas Dead Ringers is, I think, the first film that his vision is totally on the screen. Jeremy Irons is absolutely amazing in a dual role. A story about twin gynecologists. It's just fantastic. If you haven't seen any Cronenberg films, check out Dead Ringers, because it's absolutely a beautiful film and a tragic one, and it kind of showed that there was a bit more about Cronenberg than the kind of label of body horror and kind of diseases and icky things. This is Cronenberg operating at a much higher intellectual level. And the next one is also a David Cronenberg film, The Dead Zone. Again, might not be in everybody's greatest films of all time list, but I just absolutely love it. Yes, I'm biased because it's Christopher Walken, but this is Cronenberg actually getting a shot at a kind of studio film, and he does it really well. About a school teacher who has an accident, is in a coma, loses the woman he loves, and wakes up with this gift of second sight, which turns into a curse. It's just absolutely fantastic. Christopher Walken is awesome. There's just not enough films with Christopher Walken as a leading man, and this is one of them. Herbert Lom does good work as his doctor, and Martin Sheen gives a really creepy, nasty performance as a would-be presidential candidate that is corrupt and thoroughly nasty, who will go to any length to actually get elected. It's a beautiful film, and it's just got a lot of class, and obviously Cronenberg and Christopher Walken. What more do you need? The next one's a slight cheat, because it was originally made for television, but as Stanley Kubrick said, each one of these films is a mini masterpiece. It's Kieślowski's Decalogue. Yeah, I know I'm biased, but this is monumental. If there's one kind of film on the list that I would urge people to kind of check out, it's Decalogue. 10 films, they're all under an hour, loosely based on the 10 Commandments, set around a housing estate in Poland, and the characters that pass each other and the consequences of their actions on each other. It's just a beautiful achievement. The music by Zbigniew Preisner is absolutely beautiful. He would later score Three Colours and Double Life of Veronique. And Kieślowski, I mean, if you watch Decalogue 1, which is about a boy and his father who are reliant on computers to tell them what to do in their lives. If you can get past Decalogue 1, which itself is arguably one of the greatest films ever made, and it's only 50 odd minutes, it's monumental, and every film fan should have it. I mean, I'm so sad that I might actually get the Criterion Region A Blu-ray set of it as well. I mean, this Arrow edition is just awesome because it has lots of his early documentaries as well. And it's also got a rather lovely appreciation of Decalogue by Tony Raines. It's just a wonderful set, and it's just a wonderful, wonderful experience. And on a lighter note, it's Delicatessen, Jean-Pierre Junot's first film, set in the future, about cannibalism. Dominic Pignon is fantastic as a new resident in a housing estate, in a kind of set of flats, a boarding house, and everybody is eyeing him up for their latest meal. It's set in a post-apocalyptic world where food is very scarce. It's just an absolute joy. Again, the music's beautiful. Jean-Pierre Junot, Mark Harrow, again that palette of browns and greens is just wonderful, and it's one of the best debuts of all time, way back in 1990. Moving on, the next one is just one of my favourite films. It's Devil in a Blue Dress with Denzel Washington. This is directed by Carol Franklin, who also did One False Move, which is another kind of modern noir with Bill Paxton and Michael Beach. And again, this is a noir with Denzel Washington as a private eye, looking into political scandal and corruption. There's a wonderful turn by Maury Shakin. I'm not the biggest Denzel Washington fan in the world, but he's really good in this, and it really has that feel of that period in LA in the 1920s. The music, the bars, and it's just a really good modern throwback noir, if that makes any sense. Next is my favourite Guillermo del Toro film, The Devil's Backbone. I mean, we all know that Del Toro's Spanish films are better than his American ones, Kronos and Devil's Backbone. Devil's Backbone set in the Spanish Civil War in a boarding school for boys. It's a ghost story, and it features Federico Lippi, who was in Kronos, and he was also in John Sayles' masterpiece Men with Guns. It's just a beautiful film, atmospheric. I really recommend getting it in Blu-ray because it's absolutely beautiful. It doesn't necessarily go for jump scares and all of that. It's just a classy ghost story that in the end is quite moving, and it's just a beautiful piece of work. I mean, everybody says Pan's Labyrinth is his best film. I like Pan's Labyrinth, but it's nowhere near as emotionally powerful as The Devil's Backbone. So next on the list, it should be on everybody's list, is Isla de Oblivion. This is a film that stands up no matter how many times you watch it. The last 15 minutes kind of still get the heart racing, even though you've seen it multiple times, but it's just so well crafted by Clouseau. The story of two women trying to get rid of a really horrible husband and lover. It's just so nasty and bleak and cold, but it's also so wonderful. It's a masterpiece. And again, even when you know the ending, even when you know what happens, you still get sucked in, and your heart is going at the end. On a side note, the shabby detective in the raincoat was actually inspiration for Columbo, apparently. And obviously it was horribly remade with Sharon Stone and Chaz Palminteri and Isabelle Adjani as Diabolique. They should have actually just called it Diabolical. Yeah, that's a standard. I'm sure that's probably on everybody's list. The next one, on a completely different tact, is Die Hard. The first one. You have to remember, 1988, we were in the midst of Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone. Jean-Claude Van Damme had just kind of started, and these guys were getting bigger and bigger, and obviously like Commando is almost a comedy, just with the way Schwarzenegger just mows down hundreds of soldiers. It kind of reminds you of that wonderful scene in Hot Shots Part 2, where Charlie Sheen just picks up a handful of bullets and throws them at soldiers, killing them all. So the action film had to kind of change, because we were all getting a little bit tired of these muscle-bound behemoths taking out hundreds of people. So Bruce Willis came along, who looked almost like a normal person, off the success in Moonlighting, the TV show. And Die Hard, for better or worse, started a template of terrorists take over a building, a boat, a plane, a submarine, a fish and chip shop, whatever. But again, it proves the point of you've got to have a great villain, and Alan Rickman is just off the charts in this. Again, people were doing Alan Rickman after this. I'm thinking of Bruce Payne in Passenger 57. He's just doing an Alan Rickman, but obviously not as good. When Bonnie Bedelia says, "I can't believe after all this you're just a common thief," and Alan Rickman, indignant, goes, I've completely forgotten the line now. "I'm an exceptional thief." Sorry, mind went blank there. Alan Rickman's fantastic. John McTiernan, who had a string of really good films, Predator, then Die Hard, then Hunt for Red October. I would say if you do get the Blu-ray, it's really worth listening to John McTiernan's commentary track, because it's fantastic about how to make a film under the studio system. You can argue about the sequels, but the first one is just an absolute blast. I know there's a whole controversy about whether it's a Christmas film or not. I mean, that doesn't really matter. What it is a brilliant example of a new kind of action film, which obviously has now become really stale, but at the time it was fresh and new and different, and the lesson is you've got to have a great villain. The next one is Dirty Harry. Again, perhaps not for the film, but for the epitome of the 70s. For me, the last golden era of Hollywood was the 70s. You had mainstream films that were political, were socio-political, but they were also entertaining. I know over time Dirty Harry's been seen as this fascist film about, Harry Callahan just going about and blowing people away. But it's got a great score. It's really well directed by Don Siegel, and it's just hugely enjoyable. I do have a kind of guilty pleasure for Magnum Force, the second one, but after that I think they did kind of go a little bit downhill. But Dirty Harry, if you were doing like a series of films for what summed up the 70s in American cinema, Dirty Harry would be one of the essential films, I think. The next one is a great little British film directed by Stephen Frears, Dirty Pretty Things, with Chiwetel Ejiofor and Audrey Tautou. It's about the underbelly of London society with immigrants who work all the jobs, all the bad jobs that nobody else wants to work. It's about kind of relationship between Tautou and Ejiofor, who are just sharing the same space in a flat. Ejiofor wants to get home to Nigeria to his family. It's just a beautifully acted, beautifully written piece of work, and again the ending is just beautiful, and it kind of for me confirmed that Ejiofor is arguably one of the best actors working today. He's got great eyes. His performance in Serenity, Joss Whedon's science fiction film, is one of the best villains in the last 25 years, because again he doesn't chew scenery. He knows that he's a bad person, but he's fully aware of that, and it's just a really good villain performance. If Gary Oldman had did it, for example, he'd be chewing scenery and waving his arms about, and whereas Ejiofor just does a great villain role. And in Dirty Pretty Things, he's just so beautiful and understated, and he's just amazing. Again, I'm sure you can pick this up really cheap, and again it's not a quote unquote enjoyable film. It is quite a hard watch in places, but it's worthwhile sticking with it because it's just a beautiful film. The next one is by Louis Buñuel, and it's The Discreet Charm of the Bourgeoisie. This is in the Buñuel Blu-ray box set. This is a film about a group of people who want to go to dinner but can't seem to get a meal anywhere due to unforeseen circumstances. It's maybe not as perfect a film as The Exterminating Angel, but it's just an absolute joy, as Buñuel pokes fun at just about everything. It's beautifully shot, beautifully acted, and it's another Buñuel masterpiece. Moving on is Do the Right Thing, when Spike Lee was actually a good director. Watching Do the Right Thing 30 odd years later, it still has something important to say. It still asks questions. It doesn't give kind of twee answers. It does challenge the viewer. It does make the viewer think. unlike quite a lot of Spike Lee's later films, but including a remake of Oldboy, but let's not talk about that. It's got a fantastic soundtrack and just blistering performances. Obviously Ozzie Davis is wonderful in it, and John Turturro is fantastic, and Danny Aiello. It's just a great film. If you haven't seen it for a long time, it's worth checking out because it still packs a punch. The next on the list, as you probably guess, Double Life of Veronique by Kieslowski. I mean, people maybe not complain, but kind of nitpick that there's no answers in this film. Kieslowski just shows us two twins, one in Poland, one in France. One called Veronica, one called Veronique. But he doesn't give answers. He just like shows you these two people. But God, it's a beautiful film. Irene Jacob is wonderful in it. Obviously she would go on in Three Colours Red. Yeah, there's not much you can say about the plot. It's just a beautiful, beautiful film. Who knows what it means? We don't need to know what it means. We don't need to have answers to every single little thing in a film. It's just wonderful. We're getting near the end, don't worry. And the next one is another Jarmusch. It's Down by Law, featuring Tom Waits, Roberto Benigni and John Lurie. Again, it's black and white. It's about three guys who end up in prison, and spoiler alert, they end up breaking out of prison and get stuck in the bayou. Again, if you're unfamiliar with Jarmusch's work, it might be a little bit of a culture shock, because Jarmusch is about the little moments in life. He's about the little people in life that other filmmakers aren't really interested in. It's got a great score, Tom Waits with some of his best songs. It's got great performances, it's very funny, and Jarmusch in typical Jarmusch fashion. We don't see the breakout, we don't learn how they escaped from prison, because it doesn't really matter. They're in prison and then they're out of prison. It's just an absolute joy, and one of Jarmusch's best films and funniest. Second last one, it's Kubrick's Dr. Strangelove, which is one of his most perfect achievements. It was released in the same year as Failsafe, the serious film with Sidney Lumet, with Henry Fonda and Larry Hagman and Walter Matthau, which is actually a very good little film. But Kubrick kind of looked at the source material and just said, I can't actually shoot this seriously because it's just so ridiculous. This threat of thermonuclear obliteration, and it's played for laughs, and it's very funny. Lines like, obviously, you can't fight in here, this is the war room, and Sterling Hayden's obsession with bodily fluids. Peter Sellers plays three roles, including the title character Dr. Strangelove, who's obviously a Nazi that the Americans got after the war, because there's always a battle of my Nazi scientist better than your Nazi scientist. It's got a wonderful ending, the only ending you could do. It's got a great score. Kubrick uses kind of newsreel, almost documentary-like footage, as well as beautiful sets. The war room is just spectacular. And sadly, it never gets old and it never gets less relevant. And it's just it's just a masterpiece. So the last film, just to end on a real downer, is a documentary called Dreams of a Life, which I'll probably do a random review of at some point. According to that, it's E for educational. This is it's a tough watch. It's about a woman who lived in London who was found dead in her flat. So dead, in fact, she had pretty much merged with the carpet. And it uses eyewitness accounts. It uses footage from colleagues and neighbours to reconstruct essentially the woman's life. And it's jaw-dropping. It's heartbreaking in places. And again, it's kind of a reminder that, you know, those of us who live in the city, you know, people kind of slip through the cracks and people aren't noticed when they disappear, when they don't turn up. And it is quite, well, it's very powerful. And like I said, it's not a happy experience watching it. It's tough, but it is so worth seeing. It's just absolutely fantastic in a horrible way. So with that cheery bombshell, I think I'll end the film. I think I'll end the video here. Thank you very much for watching this letter D. Again, please let me know your favourite films beginning with D, because like I say, I always enjoy seeing the list, because there'll be films on it that I'll go, I really need to watch that again, or I need to check out what that is. So thank you very much for the comments. Please keep them coming. And hopefully we'll see you again for the letter E. Put your thinking caps on for the letter E. So this is Solitude Rowan saying thanks very much for watching, and hopefully we'll see you again.